my channel, Magali here, and today we are going to be talking about the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. What these muscles do, how they work together, what the relationship is, and why it's important to understand, especially during pregnancy. We'll also cover some misconceptions around the pelvic floor leaking and the core, and what we can do to make sure that we're really using these muscles effectively, not just in pregnancy and postpartum, but how they can help us during childbirth and labor. So firstly, the diaphragm and the pelvic floor form part of our core muscles. The diaphragm is located at the top and the pelvic floor is located at the bottom of our abdominal cavity. Our abdominal cavity is this middle section here. The TVA, transverse abdominis, is at the front towards the bottom and the multifidus is at the back. But for now, let's just focus on the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, and we'll really hone into that pelvic floor, and there'll be a little bit of TVA. The diaphragm, as I said, is at the top of this abdominal cavity, and it separates the abdominal cavity to the thoracic cavity, this chest cavity here at the top. It's known as our breathing muscle, and when we inhale, it contracts. It creates sort of vacuum to pull the air into the lungs. And then on the exhale, it relaxes as the air gets pushed out of the body. Its other function is to increase abdominal pressure, so we can get rid of toxins like urine, feces, and vomit. But we'll get into pressure in a minute. Now, the pelvic floor. Say hello to my pelvis, and the pelvic floor, as you can see, is at the bottom of the pelvis, of our abdominal cavity. The pelvic floor muscles run from sitting bone to sitting bone and from tailbone to pubic bone. The pelvic floor muscles is such a versatile group of muscles, and they have many functions. Sexual intercourse, the muscles need to be able to contract and relax effectively, and actually significant pelvic floor strength is necessary for orgasm. Stability, they attach to the pelvis and hips and form part of the core muscles. Support of the internal organs, the rectum, the bladder, and the uterus. And these last two are the ones that we're really going to get quite deep into today. So responsive, when we laugh, jump, cough, even sneeze, the muscles react reflexively to make sure that there's no leaking of any urine, feces, or even our organs to make sure that they stay intact in the body. The last one is breathing. The pelvic floor muscles contract upwards, and the TVA, that transverse abdominis, contracts in to push the breath out of the body. But before we get into that breathing relationship of the pelvic floor and the diaphragm, I'd like to introduce you to a third silent secret member of the group, and that's pressure, abdominal pressure. It's not tangible, but it's very much there. So let's think of the core and our abdominal cavity as this pressure system, and the diaphragm forms the top of the pressure system and the pelvic floor forms the bottom of the pressure system. Now, how do the diaphragm and the pelvic floor work together to help us breathe and live optimally? Well, when we inhale, there's an increase of pressure in our system. It's not because the breath literally goes into the belly, but as we established, the diaphragm creates sort of vacuum system to pull that breath into the lungs. So the diaphragm moves down, but then so does everything else. And if our pelvic floor muscles stay contracted, stay upwards, tight and clenched, there's going to be nowhere for that pressure to go. Everything's going to meet in the middle and we're going to feel really clogged up and tight. So the pelvic floor muscles actually need to relax to create space for that increase of pressure in the body due to the vacuum, due to the inhale being pulled into the lungs. So if this is our diaphragm and this is our pelvic floor, when we inhale, the diaphragm pulls that breath into the body, pushes everything down, and the pelvic floor muscles must relax. As we exhale, it's actually the pelvic floor muscles and a little bit of TVA, so that front deep layer of core, that pull everything in and push the organs up. The organs recoil back up and the diaphragm relaxes to push the breath out. Inhale down. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. One more. This is of course assuming that we're breathing into the, I want to say into the belly, but we're not actually breathing in the belly, are we? But that we're using our diaphragm to breathe, diaphragmatic breathing, and we're not just breathing into the chest quite high up, which we'll get into in a sec. So what we want to see, what we want to happen, and what these muscles are made to do is as we inhale, the diaphragm pulls down, pelvic floor relaxes. As we exhale, pelvic floor comes up, diaphragm relaxes. Inhale. Exhale. So that is how it's all meant to work. The problem is that we've got stuck in this movement of wanting or somehow thinking we need really tight, strong pelvic floor muscles. And as soon as you get pregnant, all you hear about is make sure you do your Kegels. I didn't even know what Kegels were before I got pregnant, and then all of a sudden people were telling me to do them all the time. Make sure you squeeze your pelvic floor muscles. You need really tight, strong core, blah, 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 blah. Yes, of course. Strong pelvic floor muscles are important. A strong diaphragm muscle is important. Strong core muscles all together is really important for the body. But where we're getting it wrong is that actually learning to relax these muscles is just as important as learning to contract them. Our core muscles, and more specifically our pelvic floor muscles, were made to move reflexively. These muscles should be working with demand-specific activation. They were made to react, to adapt, and to move when they need to move, not just to always be contracted and tense and tight. As I mentioned before, when we laugh, sneeze, cough, the pelvic floor muscles contract to make sure that urine, feces, organs, baby, they react to make sure that nothing falls out of the body. But when we're always contracting and tensing them, cognitively we're telling them that they always need to be turned on, and we're completely ruining this anticipatory nature that they have. It's a bit like us. As humans, we have reflexes, right? So when someone throws us a ball, assuming they're not launching it at our face, but a nice ball, our reflex is to go and catch it. But if we're always on guard, waiting for the ball, there, is it coming, and we're tight, and we don't want to move, just in case, and we're tensing, and when the ball does come, we're tired, and our reflexes may not be as quick. Well, it's exactly the same with the pelvic floor, and more often than not, it's actually this over-clenching and this overusing, over-recruiting of the muscle that causes things like leaking, because it's always tight, it's always active, it's always contracted, and it's tired. So when the body needs it, when we laugh, cough, sneeze, jump, whatever, it doesn't have the strength, it doesn't have the awareness, it's not awake enough, it can't adapt, it doesn't have that reflexive and anticipatory nature that it was made for. It's completely lost its natural ability to anticipate when it's needed. So actually what we need to work on is the relaxation of this muscle, but not just the relaxation of the pelvic floor, but also its relationship with the diaphragm and the other core and abdominal muscles. So let's imagine that this is our abdominal cavity, our pressure system. The pelvic floor muscles are at the bottom, the TVA and other abdominal muscles are in the front, and the diaphragm is at the top. When the pelvic floor muscles are always tight and squeezed, the diaphragm has nowhere to go. The diaphragm is not able to be used properly to contract down, to vacuum that air into the lungs. So not only are we not working that muscle, the diaphragm, properly, but we're sending the breath to the chest, and we're activating our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight mode. So not only have we lost connection with our system as a whole, how the diaphragm and the pelvic floor work together, but now we're breathing in the chest, and this is really not good for our nervous system. This can very quickly become a vicious circle, because the less we work a muscle, the less it's going to have the power to work. So the less we work the diaphragm, the more we breathe in the chest, the more we activate our sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight mode, the less we work the muscle, and on and on and on and on. And I think you'll agree with me that nowadays way too many people are living in this fight or flight stressy style mode, which is why this is so important. The diaphragm is directly connected to our nervous system. So correct activation of that diaphragm enables us to go into our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest mode, where we're able to take long, deep breaths into the body and reach that calmer state of being. Now, how does this affect us during pregnancy? Or actually, I should say, how does pregnancy affect the relationship between that diaphragm and the pelvic floor? Because I think you'll agree that pregnancy, when we're carrying a baby, especially in late to second to third trimester, and then when you're about to burst, there's a huge increase in pressure in our system. It's harder to have bigger meals, we constantly need to empty our bladders, and it's becoming harder and harder to take big, deep belly breaths, which means we need to do whatever we can to create more space in the body. And as we've established, one of these things is ensuring that we relax the pelvic floor muscles. And I know that that seems crazy after everything we've been taught, but if we're always squeezing the pelvic floor muscles, let me bring my balloon back. Hey, I'm balloon and I'm back. The pelvic floor muscles at the bottom, baby somewhere in there with all of the organs, diaphragm at the top. If we're always squeezing at the bottom, squeeze, 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 and then we're trying to breathe, squeeze, 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 it's just going to pop. It's not popping. It's a good balloon. There's just not enough space in that body. We really need to get the muscles to work together. We really need to learn to relax those pelvic floor muscles. And again, I know it sounds crazy after everything we've been told. As soon as you get pregnant, like I mentioned before, it's all pelvic floor and it's Kegels. But let me ask you, why? Why all of the sudden? And although I understand the reasoning, and that because there's increased pressure on, the bladder and things like that, I think we think that we need to tighten them and that it's the baby causing this pressure. And although that's not wrong, unless you're actively experiencing leaking, in which case I recommend that you go see a specialist physio, there's no need to be clenching and tightening and really contracting, working those pelvic floor muscles 24/7. They're doing their job. The body is so intelligent. The body knows what to do. And the pelvic floor, especially, along with the diaphragm and that relationship, as I said, they are anticipatory muscles. They work reflexively when the body needs them. I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that Kegels and pelvic floor exercises don't have their place. I think they 100% do have their place. And it is important to learn how to contract our pelvic floor muscles, especially making sure that we're going all the way through. Let me bring my little model for this. And what I mean by going all the way through is making sure that we're contracting towards the anus, the perineum, the vaginal opening, and then all the way to the top into that TVA, that transverse abdominis, which is our deepest layer of core muscles and really important in terms of stability and things like that. But then relax, relax, relax. Once we've done this activation, the contracting all the way through, let's also relax them down. And remember, quite often we think that the exhale is relaxing, but with the pelvic floor, the exhale contracts to help push that breath out as we establish. It's the inhale that relaxes the pelvic floor. And the exhale, where you might feel this squeeze in the middle, in the tummy, as the TVA works along with the pelvic floor to help push that breath out of the body. Now, let's get into some juicy stuff. Labor and childbirth. Again, we have been conditioned to think that we need strong pelvic floor muscles to help push the baby out. But if we've just established that taking a big breath in, the diaphragm goes down, the pelvic floor relaxes down, we create space downwards into the body, into that pelvis and into the opening, then surely what we need to do is relax the body for childbirth. And I know that that seems really crazy because the body is going to struggle to be relaxed when we're feeling contractions during labor. But this is where things like breathing, and this is where all of this stuff can become a really either vicious circle if we're going about it the wrong way, but if we're really implementing the correct activation and relaxation of these muscles, it can be a complete game changer. A little bit of homework or a little bit of a self-case study. Next time you go to the toilet, next time you need a poo, firstly, make sure that your knees are lifted above hip level, so perhaps place your feet on a poo stool or a bin, anything that you have at home. We really want to relax the rectum. And then when you start to feel that it's coming, assuming that you're not absolutely desperate and having to hold it in even before you make it to the toilet, I invite you to take a big deep breath in and see if you can relax the muscles around the anus. And then notice that it's as you breathe out that pushes it out. So the inhale allows everything to move its way down the body. And yes, the exhale and the squeezing pushes it out of the body. And it's exactly the same concept for childbirth. We want to find that relationship with the relaxation of the muscles. We want to encourage everything to move down. We want to encourage baby to move down. And especially, we want to encourage that rest and digest mode of the body. Everything is working together. Long, deep breaths, not just calming for the mind and body, but the diaphragm moves down. Everything else moves down. The pelvic floor relaxes and we're able to open the body, open the muscles of the pelvis, and then we can do that big final push to release out of the body. If cognitively we've built this idea that the muscles always need to be contracted, we're really going to struggle to let them go when we need to let them go. For example, childbirth. We need to neurologically build that relationship, build that control, that the muscles can relax. The body knows what to do. The body is so clever, it is intelligent, and these muscles, these core muscles, so diaphragm, pelvic floor, and TVA, they are anticipatory muscles. They work reflexively. We don't need to be actively engaging them all the time 24/7. They are going to get stuck there and they are going to lose that beautiful anticipatory nature. The body wasn't made to isolate muscles. The body was made to work together as a whole, and muscles should be working for demand-specific activation. So what's the solution? Well, I'm pretty sure we basically covered it. Relax the pelvic floor, not all the time, but learn to completely let it go. Really retraining the brain and the muscle to make sure that they're not always active. The only time where I would say there is a cause for concern is if you're experiencing leaking, constipation, or painful sex, in which case, as I mentioned before, I would recommend that you go see a specialist physio. But again, more often than not, it's not because the muscles aren't strong enough, it's because they've got stuck in this clenching position. So in terms of constipation, we're not able to get anything out. Painful sex, the muscles are too tight. And leaking, they've lost that anticipatory nature. They're stuck there. So when a little bit of urine wants to come out, they haven't got that reflexive action that they need. Ultimately, it's about learning to retrain the core system as a whole. Diaphragm, pelvic floor, transverse abdominal, these muscles were made to act reflexively. They were made to move, react, and engage when the body needs them. And on that note, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd like to say thank you to my two assistants here for helping me out. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. It really helps support my content. And I will see you on Tuesday for another one. Bye guys, lots of love.